Good day and welcome to Westchester Talk Radio, westchestertalkradio.com. I'm John Marino. Welcome to the Cup of Joe political show made possible by our good friends at Entergy, the Indian Point Energy Center, supporting our communities through April of 2021. Lipolis Electric, don't be left in the dark. Get Lipolis, and Hightower Westchester, managing your wealth to a fiduciary standard, along with White Plains Hospital. Special thanks to our heroes at White Plains Hospital for all they've done throughout 2020, handling the COVID-19 pandemic. We are joined here today on the Cup of Joe political show by Westchester County Executive George Latimer. George Latimer, good morning to you. Thank you for coming back to join us again here on Westchester Talk Radio. It's been quite an interesting 2020, no doubt about that. The current COVID uptick in Westchester right now, does this look like, according to the health experts in the county, does this look like it could be the expected second wave that we were anticipating, or maybe just a little uptick and maybe we can just bypass a second wave?
No, John, I think this is the second wave. We've reached the point of active cases that we were at in the end of April, beginning of May. There's that many positives a day, 750 positives a day for the last number of days. So we're testing 10,000 people a day. We're getting, percentages in the 6-7% infection rate. So this is the second wave. I'm no scientist, so we'll let the medical professionals make the official call. But to me, it's clearly a second wave. We're dealing with it a wash. We're over 300 hospitalizations right now. Now, that's not as steep as it was at the peak in the spring. So we're hoping that the flattening of the curve, you remember we used to talk about that back in the spring, let's flatten the curve, that will happen at some point in time below the level at which our medical infrastructure is overtaxed. It's about 3,000 hospital beds in Westchester County, about 160 ICU beds. And right now, if we're over 300 cases, we're, slightly above the 10% range, or around the 10% range of hospitalizations versus total available beds. Now, you don't want to clear out all the beds if you can avoid it, because there are other people ill with other things, heart attacks and so forth. But when you compare it to what you're hearing in other parts of the country, where they're running out of bed space, they're running out of ICU space, we are in a better situation than they are. But clearly, it's on an uptick. And in terms of fatalities now, we've lost 15, 20 people a week the last few weeks. And we went the whole summer, and we lost 11 people in two consecutive months. So while the fatality rates doesn't begin to approach what was happening in late March and early April, we had consecutive nights, 30, 40 people passed away from COVID. That was just unbelievable. We've come up from the valley that we had in the summertime. So clearly a second wave. And I think there's one other thing I'll just mention that we're concerned about. We're just now, as we're speaking, just shy of 2 weeks after Thanksgiving. No matter how many people were encouraged, don't have big Thanksgiving parties, you may spread the disease. People did what they did. There's really no way to enforce any regulation, let's be honest. And so we're waiting to see now if you see, in addition to the surge that we're having now, a spike on top of the surge. And if that is the case, then we can be doubly worried, because we're a couple of weeks away from Christmas. And Christmas as a holiday is just like Thanksgiving. Families want to get together. People, kids who are, far afield come home to see the parents. Grandkids come and we run the risk of, the surge continuing. If those things happen, worst case scenario, we're still in the surge for a while. And that's concerning.
Now, the surges we've seen around other parts of the country are being experienced in other parts of the country. Lessons learned from what we experienced so far in combination with what we see going on elsewhere. Lessons learned so far, you think, during the COVID pandemic, and how can they be applied with this second wave?
Well, first of all, I think universal mask wearing out in public and in many, not all, private settings is essential. We were not there in the beginning of this. We were not told by CDC day one, you must wear masks, you must wear it all the time. So I myself and others went about our business for a while without mask wearing, and then the potential of spread was greater that way. I think we have a greater mask compliance now. It's not perfect. There are some people who just won't do it. They have a philosophical reason not to do it. You have some young kids who just won't do it. They're social. They don't want to infringe upon their social lives, and they don't think they're going to get it. But in general, certainly in this area, in Westchester County, we generally have pretty good compliance of that. And I think it was important that we learned the first time through, that mask wearing reduces the spread. And so I think we've learned that lesson. The second thing appears to be that the medical professionals know how to handle better the COVID cases. They protect themselves from COVID, and they don't spread it amongst other patients by the way that they handle their protocols. And then also that they seem to be getting better results. We don't have an antiviral treatment for this, but the general care of the patients appear to ensure that less of them get as severely sick, hospitalization and fatality. So that is a good sign. If that holds, I mean, that's what I'm observing for the sake of a few weeks. So those lessons are helpful. I think one of the lessons that has not been learned is this is a serious pandemic. There's still people out there who want to compare it to the flu. It's not comparable. There are people out there who, I don't know if they'll call it a hoax anymore, but they still think that it's about, wearing a mask is about control over somebody. And when we limit the amount of people that can be in a certain setting, it's about people who want control over your life. No, it isn't. It's about protecting your life, because those are the things that the public health professionals tell us. So there's still an element of that out there. And it's going to be very hard to change, because Americans are an independent lot. That's a very good thing in general. I have plenty of that independence, as do you. But at some point in time, you have to show self-discipline, and you have to read facts and truth, not just what you want to be true. You know, as a little kid, I want to eat ice cream every day. Well, an adult, you have to realize mom and dad aren't around anymore to tell you don't eat it. You have to know that you can't just eat it in lieu of food or normal meals. Mm-hmm. So I think there's still a fair bit of irresponsibility out there. But it's not my job to lecture and be the nanny. We try to do what we can do governmentally. We reduce the amount of public events down to a trickle. We try to control as much as we can, getting PPE out to the people who need it. And, we try to ride the wave through.
Is there a better way to enforce mask wearing, or let's take it a step farther with the vaccine on hand and now to make sure everybody gets vaccinated? We see this report from New York City that the FDNY, a large percentage of firemen say they're not going to take the vaccine. MTA workers, a huge percentage of them say no vaccine for me. How do we really stem this second wave and get rid of COVID and knock it down to a minimum without mass vaccination?
Well, a couple of things, first of all, apply. First, when you're talking about people wearing masks, that's an ongoing challenge. When you're talking about people getting a vaccination, that's a one or two setting situation. We could, in theory, make it mandatory for public employees. You can make it mandatory for everybody in the society, but that's beyond my power. We could certainly, as a county government, we could certainly make it mandatory for all county employees, or we could specify departments where we have the greatest public contact and just say you will get a vaccine. That's it. Your job depends on you doing that. Obviously, we don't want to mandate things that we think we can get individual compliance from, because it's a heavy hand. The heavy hand may not be necessary. But we have to see, what the vaccine distribution structure is like and how early in the process people will get it. So, for example, in the county government, as an employer of 4,500 people, I would assume people in our health department would be the first round of people to get it. I would assume our public safety department, the county police, would be in the second round to get it, because they have public contact across the board with people. If you go to you stop a car and you pull them over, you don't know if the guy's got COVID or not. And so you want to be prepared and vaccinated against that if you can. The anti-vax reality, I think, is a function. There's been a certain number of people in the society that have always been anti-vaccination. But now there's this conspiracy theory that's going wild. And it comes, frankly, from people who hold sort of extreme political views, and they view behind every decision some ulterior motive and some nefarious motive, and they can't be convinced otherwise. They read things on the internet. They go, "What if this?" or "How come that?" And they live in that dark, shaded world. We're going to have a discussion internally as to what we do or don't do with our county employees. But if you're in a public contact position, I believe you need to be vaccinated. You need to make sure that you are protected from getting or giving the disease. And if that's what the vaccine does, when I was a kid, and John, I'm a little older than you are, but you can still relate to this. When I was a kid, I got vaccinated for whooping cough, measles, German measles, mumps, chicken pox,
right?
Polio. I got vaccinated. My generation were pincushions with the number of vaccinations we got. Like a little kid, I don't want a needle. I don't even like them now. But I never got smallpox, whooping cough, polio, all those diseases. So from my observation, they worked. They protected me as a young kid from getting childhood diseases that were prevalent in the decade before I was born and became a young child. So when I listen to these people who are going on and on about, I don't know what's in a vaccination, let me ask you a question. When you eat a Pop-Tart in the morning, do you know what's in a Pop-Tart? Did you ever look at the ingredients? Don't tell me I don't know what the ingredients are of the vaccine. You put the Pop-Tart in your mouth and you don't know what's in the ingredients of Pop-Tart. So it really loses me in those arguments, and I'm afraid it's really reflective more of what's going on in the society with extreme political beliefs and conspiracy theories rather than an intelligent, healthy, scientific situation. If the science community has a vaccine that will put this disease behind us, by God, we ought to take it and stop coming up with another reason not to. It's just, it's frankly, you talk about herd immunity. It's herd insanity, in my judgment.
Yeah, I talk to people on both the left and right, obviously in this capacity and then in my private life, and I see from the far left and the far right, everything you've spoken about no vaccine, no mask wearing. Well, you got parents who are in your 90s at home. You live with them. You got to protect them. Nope, it's a conspiracy, and it's something that we have to find our way to work around with most of society, obviously, before I think we really can fight COVID the way we really need to. And the effect of COVID on the budget in the county. Now, we talked a few months back about the effect up to that point so far during the summer as we hit the final portion of 2020, the effect of COVID on the budget heading into the new year. What do you see? Has the effect been as bad as we expected?
No, it wasn't. And I'm happy for that. We had projected, probably, I'm trying to think of when I had the press conference. It might have been late May, it might have been early June, in which we were looking at a worst case scenario of the bottom dropping out of the county budget, that we would have a huge gap. At one point, we estimated the revenue gap at about $150 million, which on a $2 billion budget is a huge amount of money. And we didn't know how we'd close it and how we'd handle it. We took a number of actions to reduce the impact for 2020, the in the year budget situation. And probably the single biggest action we took in late July and August, which is a voluntary separation plan where we offered an incentive for people to leave their positions in county government. It was a fairly lucrative offer. You could get $1,000 for every year that you worked for the county. If you've been around the county for a long time, that became a nice chunk of dough for you to work with. In the long run, it pays for itself because the position goes off the payroll, and the annualized cost of the position might be, $75,000 position. So you pay the person a $20,000 incentive to leave. Within the year, you save $55,000, and next year you save all $75,000. Depending on whether or not you have to rehire the position or not. Some of the positions, maybe about a quarter of the positions that left, we're going to have to rehire because the positions are too essential. But 3/4 of them, we can leave vacant for 21, and that gave us a savings. So those things helped us. The biggest single thing that helped us was there was a COVID CARES Act earlier in the year, which allocated money, and amongst the recipients were county governments with 500,000 people or more in population. So I think 6 or 7 New York counties qualified for that. Westchester was one of them. We got an allocation of $168 million. Now, we couldn't use it to balance our budget, but we could use it to cover COVID-related expenses. So we spent a lot of overtime in the health department. We spent a lot of money getting personal protective equipment through the emergency services department. We had overtime shifts at both the jail and the police department because you didn't want people working over long hours and being exposed to COVID. So you had rotation of people in times through, and you went up with more overtime. We had a number of other costs that were individual costs. And then we created some programs that we thought were necessary. Money for feeding people, money to help with eviction prevention, money that supported local businesses. When it was all said and done, the COVID CARES Act allocation, we didn't use it all, but we used a significant amount of it. It allowed us to save money in other ways, which then gives us a balanced budget for 20, and then some resources by which we could go into 21 with a much better budget than we had any right to expect. Now, we're going to assume that, whatever benefit we got was a one-shot benefit, but it offset the one-shot loss of revenue that came because things were closed up due to COVID. The expectation is by 2022 with the vaccine, that year will look like a normal year, and we can go back to normal revenue, 700,000+ in sales tax revenue, and then we would rebalance the budget, without the benefit of additional money. We don't know what the feds are going to do this year on the positive side. We also don't know what the state's going to do because the state has got a huge budget gap. And, part of the way they may balance it is by pushing costs down to the county. We don't know that, but, the state will resolve its issues when it does. And if it does create problems for us mid-year, then we'll just have to deal with it. I mean, I don't have any magic bullets. We'll look at what resources we have that can offset whatever additional costs we get sent.
Now, the new budget for 2021, what does that look like? How does that shape up?
It's still under discussion by the Board of Legislators. They're expected on Monday, December 14th, to have an all-day session that would finalize the adoption of the budget. They're making some changes, modifications, additions in certain categories and so forth. And they will submit after their discussions next Monday the 14th. They will submit an adopted budget passed by a majority of members back to us. And, we're going to be negotiating in between so that if they want to do certain things, if we can accept them, then we have a budget that when we receive it, I'll sign it into law shortly thereafter. If there are spending objectives that I don't support, I have the right to line item veto the budget. Ultimately, I could veto the whole budget, which would be counterproductive. That's the act that happens when you're angry and you don't, you can't really negotiate a closure. We're in good terms right now between the two branches. If we wind up with some vetoes, line item vetoes, we might use that. But I don't expect that's going to happen because here's the deal. The budget we submitted is $15 million in spending less than last year. We actually cut total spending this year over last. We cut $1 million off of the property tax levy for the second straight year. That means 2 consecutive years of a property tax decrease in Westchester County. You haven't had that in 20 years. It's been 20 years since you've had back-to-back cuts in the county property tax levy, assuming this budget is adopted. The budget funds the departments and the basic services that we have, affordable housing efforts, again, for feeding population, dealing with rent evictions, child care support, the proper funding of all of the different elements of county government. We reestablished the household chemical cleanup days. We're going to do that again. That's funded in the budget. We funded, the improvement of our county bus fleet. They're both, more buses now are hybrid and electric than they were before. And we put up protective plexiglass in the buses. All of that is part of what we've done in this budget. We have capital projects for certain things as well as operating monies. So I think if you have a budget that provides the basic services and cuts the county property taxes, you pretty much have as good a budget as you're going to get. And, let's not be cute about this. I'm a Democrat, and the rhetoric is always Democrats are going to raise taxes. And they tell you that over and over and over again. And people don't ever look at their taxes. They would just assume, yeah, he's a Democrat. He must have raised my taxes because that's all they ever do. Well, they're wrong. This would be the second straight year we've cut property taxes. And that's a real number. You have a community like New Rochelle. Property tax payers there had a cut last year in the county portion of their property taxes. That was 2 to 3%. Now, the school district is the majority of your taxes. If you pay your taxes, property owner of Westchester County, 2/3 of your money goes to school district. The other 1/3 slice of the pie goes in part to the county and then to your municipal government. The county piece is a little bigger than the municipal piece in most cases. But, if you live in New Rochelle, you got a cut in county property taxes. Now, somebody's going to say, oh, they raised the sales tax. Well, we didn't raise the sales tax in New Rochelle. New Rochelle, White Plains, Yonkers, and Mount Vernon all have the same sales tax today that they had the day I took office. And, there's a big argument about police. Democrats are going to defund. We didn't do that. So when I hear the rhetoric, it's because somebody in a rally in Brooklyn said defund the police. That's not what we did in Westchester County. Fund the police department appropriately for the services they have. We want to see certain reforms. We're working with an outside committee that include law enforcement and includes activists from the community to make certain changes in our training and in our procedures so that you have a more socially just effort. But defunding the police does not do it. Barack Obama said as much. Al Sharpton said as much. So if they say don't defund the police, then that pretty much debunks it. So what I'm trying to deal with, John, is the perception versus the reality. We are not perfect. I'm not perfect. I've learned a lot over the years. You've known me a long time in other positions. This job changed because of COVID dramatically, and we're trying to adjust to those changes. But the bottom line is you have to forget about the rhetoric and you have to look at the reality of it. And the reality of it is we've been very careful in putting this budget together.
Now, consumer confidence, consumer spending, and the tax money you take in the county, obviously that went down a good deal earlier in the year. That seems to be rising up as we open up As we head towards 2021, do you see consumer confidence growing in Westchester?
It's going to depend on the vaccine and the reduction in the amount of infection. I think we saw this summer when the reduction was more profound in the amount of infection. We were only having a couple of people infected a day, that people felt more comfortable, more people went out, the weather was nice, you could eat outdoors, people felt more comfortable doing that. You saw the growth of greater consumer confidence. Now it's wintertime, it's cold, you can't do the outdoor things that you could do before. And then you have to further make it complicated by the rise in the COVID infections. So you're seeing less consumer confidence. This is important because the holiday shopping season is the big time of the year for sales that keeps business afloat and sales tax revenue that keeps governments afloat. And if we have a terrible Christmas shopping season, that's going to affect our businesses. It's going to affect individuals who work for those businesses. It's going to affect the government. I do think that because we have this mechanism, online shopping, which was not what I grew up on, but now generations are more comfortable doing this than going to the mall or going to the downtown shopping stores. I think we have a chance to have at least a reasonable offset to holiday shopping. Now, for me as a consumer, I don't buy very much online. I'm not comfortable with the online setting. It's also a function of age. The younger you are, the more comfortable you are with the
Right.
electronic medium of purchasing things. So we'll see how that plays out.
County Executive George Latimer, our guest here. Cup of Joe, political show. I'm John Marino, Westchester Talk Radio, produced by Sharc Creative and made possible by our good friends at Entergy, the Indian Point Energy Center, supporting our communities through April of 2021. Wartburg Healthcare and Rehabilitation in Mount Vernon, Park Sterling Realty in Bronxville, and Michael Labriola Landscape Design and Construction in Armonk. George Latimer, a look back at the 2020 elections in Westchester. How well do you think our new way of electing and selecting our representatives with mail-in and absentee balloting went?
Well, you had a tremendous turnout in this election. I don't think anybody can doubt that this is one of the most dramatic elections in my lifetime. There have been others, but the turnout in this one far exceeded what we saw in the last number of years. The nature of President Trump is pretty strong. If you love him, you really love him. If you hate him, you really hate him. And so, as often happens in the re-election race, it's a referendum on the incumbent. And if you like the incumbent, you keep him. If you don't like the incumbent, you pick the other guy, almost no matter who he is. In my lifetime, I've seen incumbent presidents lose: Jimmy Carter, George H.W. Bush, Gerald Ford, and now Donald Trump. And in every one of those cases, we weren't really sure who the challenger was and what they were going to be like. Jimmy Carter benefited, Ronald Reagan benefited, Bill Clinton benefited by being that alternative, and now Joe Biden. The turnout gave us big numbers across the board. And Westchester County now, by registration, is a very solidly Democratic county. And it wasn't that way as recently as 25 years ago. I grew up in a county in which Mount Vernon and Greenburgh and White Plains were all Republican communities. And when I first ran for public office in the city of Rye, it was a triumph of hope over experience that a Democrat could win in Rye City. I won a county legislative seat that had never been held by a Democrat. I chaired the Board of Legislators as the first Democrat to ever chair it. And then I won some tough races that were really brutal, that the other side had a lot of money. But when you get a big turnout in Westchester County, almost assuredly the Democrats are going to do well. We did well this election. Joe Biden won Westchester County by well over a margin of well over 150,000 votes, which is the largest margin of victory in any county in New York State outside of New York City. The percentage might not be the highest, but the absolute number of votes, it's higher than any other single county in New York. The marquee race between Senator Pete Harkin, the Democrat, and Rob Astorino, my predecessor, whom I defeated. Everybody knows Rob Astorino. Rob was seen as a real good chance to win the Senate seat, but Pete beat him by 6,000 votes. And then up and down the line, Shelley Mayer, Chris Burdick, wherever there was a competitive race. We even picked up a council seat in North Salem. We held a council seat in Lewisboro. So this is now the fourth straight year that the Democrats have done very well in Westchester County, almost a sweep everywhere, a couple of exceptions. Now, will that hold? Part of it is the personality of Donald Trump. Does he leave center stage, or is he still sort of the avatar for Republicans everywhere? I have plenty of Republican friends who understand that Trump is so popular with their base that they don't dare criticize him, but in private conversations, They look for a conservative much more like a Ronald Reagan, who they feel was the popular conservative rather than the divisiveness of a Trump. But from our standpoint, the Democrats can win elections, and I've won elections, but you've got to govern. You can't, no matter if your record in governing is so bad, your campaigning can't overcome it. You can go out there and grip and grin. This is society. You can't even shake hands to the same degree. Go to the train station, nobody's there. So it's a different political climate, but you have to perform. And if my administration and my party perform, we will be successful in the future. If we do not perform, if we lose our way, if we get caught up in a little too much ideology, a little too much what's happening in Brooklyn, and too much of what's happening in other parts of the world, then we could suffer. But I think the Westchester voters, very smart people, they can tell you from a mile away if you're a phony or not, and they don't get bamboozled. These are people who are successful in every form of their life, and they look at politics with a bit of a jaundiced eye, and you have to prove to them that you deserve the opportunity.
This mail-in absentee system we used in 2020, do you think this can be an effective way moving forward, a new model of handling our elections?
Well, I favor mail-in voting. I want to make sure that there are protections so that the system can't be abused. And then obviously, I prefer that it be implemented with advanced circumstances to plan for it. This year, it was part of the emergency reaction to COVID that people, used the mail ballot because they did not want to be compromised by going out either in early voting or election day. But we had a tremendous early voting result, 152,000 votes early, which really was something special. And then you add to it the fact that we had a good turnout on election day, so the machine balloting together was pretty significant. But there's no question we had a huge amount of absentee ballots, and one of the concerns is that if you don't have a pandemic, you go back to business as usual. A lot of people just don't feel motivated enough to go out and vote. They don't know who the people are. They don't know what the jobs are. I can't tell you how many times, John, I've been involved county government for 13 years as a legislator, went up to the state legislature, came back down to be county executive. The people who come up to me, they're not stupid people. They go, well, what do you do? And you say, well, the county government is a regional local government that provides certain services that each town and city does not provide. And as county executive, I'm an equivalent of the mayor of Westchester, although I don't have authority over mayors and municipal governments, but I do in the areas where we have responsibility, treat sewage, run a bus system, run a jail, run an airport. I can explain it in one paragraph. The person goes, oh, I get it. But they don't naturally know that. And, at our level of government, we're not celebrity politicians. You turn on TV, there's Bill de Blasio or Rudy Giuliani or Mike Bloomberg. Everybody knows who the mayor of New York City is, but they don't know who the mayor of Mamaroneck Village is. And when you see Chuck Schumer, you have an idea of who a legislator is, but you don't know who your county legislators, your state legislators are. So, we live in a world in which we have to really try very hard to show that we're doing something of value.
Presidential election, as you referred to, Donald Trump defeated by Joe Biden. Is this beneficial, as you see it, for Westchester, with maybe a second version of the CARES Act maybe about ready to come down?
Well, I think it is. And of course, let me preface it by saying I am a Democrat. I supported Joe Biden in the election. I've not been a fan of Donald Trump. I don't jump on the bandwagon of bashing. But I just personally did not find his style of leadership appealing. I think the way he would run his rallies and get up there and insult people and say funny things about people of all sorts just was not presidential to me. And then, as I said a second ago, I think there are far better models for the Republican Party of men who were conservative, who delivered conservative ideas, Eisenhower, Reagan, others, Gerald Ford, George Bush the father. These were men who were certainly not liberal. They weren't Democrats, but, on the Democratic side, I think Joe Biden is a man of balance and reason. He's been criticized in the Democratic Party for being a centrist. So I had to laugh when at the closing of the campaign, he was described as a socialist because he's far from that. That was the negative on Joe Biden during the primary campaign. He knows his way around Washington. If something can be done, he has the skill set to do it. Whether or not Mitch McConnell and the Senate is going to be willing to work with him if he's in control is anybody's guess. Because we've reached the point at which the policies are scorched earth. And I'm going to be blunt with you. I don't blame my local Republican friends for this, but I do blame the national Republicans. I think they have decided to play scorched earth politics. Now, there's an element of Democrats that do the same thing, but it is not the majority of them. If you remember, people say, well, the Democrats, they impeached Trump. Do you remember how reticent Nancy Pelosi was to do impeachment? It took a long time before she came around to doing it. People forget that. They say, oh, she did this. No, she did not want the impeachment. I think she foresaw that while it could have been merited, that it wasn't a wise political thing to do, and a number of Congress members would lose their seats because of it. But the bottom line is Trump was so outside of the norm that it changed, sort of the structure of the normal political battle lines, in which conservatives believe certain things and progressives believe other things, and we debate and we argue, and then we try to find compromise where we can between two sets of point of views. But you have a lot of people out there who are angry. And John, they believe they have reason for anger. They think somebody's getting something they're not getting. They're thinking that their value to the society has been underappreciated. They don't like seeing things that they don't like. They have religious or philosophical beliefs that they don't feel are driving the politics of things. And when they don't get what they want, they're pretty angry about it. And by the way, there are folks in the Democratic Party who feel the same way. They're just not the same percentage of people in the party. So I think Joe Biden has the potential to be a very good president. And somebody says, is he going to be the next FDR? I said, I think he's more of a Harry Truman, if you ask me my opinion. I think he's a regular Joe from Scranton. And I think he's going to approach things less like FDR, who's going to be visionary and change everything around, and much more like Harry Truman, who's going to be pretty steadfast, knows who he is, regular guy, and going to govern from that platform. I don't know these people. This is my judgment.
How badly does Westchester need funding from a new stimulus bill, which we again seem to be on the verge of getting, but hey, who knows after 3 months of negotiating back and forth?
Yeah, it's hard to know, John. I think Westchester would benefit from it because right now we've got businesses that are in dire straits and we want to be able to help them. We have people who are unemployed, who don't know where the next meal is coming from. We want to be able to help feed them. We have all kinds of housing needs. There's homeless housing, there's affordable housing, there's a whole range of things. And it's not that the Fed should just dump money in our laps. The Feds can create all kinds of requirements that we do certain specific things, have specific programs. But let me give you an example of one thing that we need. So you're going to have remote education or hybrid education. Kids are going to be home and studying instead of going into school because they're afraid that if they go into school, they're going to spread the virus. Well, how does mom and dad both work if a kid has to be home? So somebody's going to have to take home, or there's going to have to be some kind of daycare structure set up. Where's that money coming from? That's the kind of money, stimulus money, that I view as being necessity. We can then help people get through this period of time. It would be temporary until the economy straightens out. When the economy straightens out and the health, the COVID situation straightens out, then normalcy returns. But until normalcy returns, you need federal money to help structure childcare or other kinds of structures so that mom and dad can both work and Junior can sit in front of a laptop and try to learn, which is tough to do. To be candid with you, when I was in second or third grade, I don't know how I could have sat in front of this and taken my lessons. I would be squirming around and playing with the dog and doing everything I could to not do my schoolwork. I was like any other kid,
Right.
So
now, as we hit the end of 2020 here, look back for us at 2020 and what you think your key accomplishments have been, the county's key accomplishments, and any disappointments along the way when you look back and you look back at it and say, maybe we could have done this a little differently.
Well, I think, everything that relates to COVID, which is the far and away the dominant story of the year, gives you an opportunity to look back and try to be thoughtful about what you would have done. And I think I alluded to the fact that at the very beginning of the pandemic in March, we were not clear on the protocols that we should have relative to masking and social distancing. And we reacted, I think, like most governments did, based on what we were told at the time, but we did not know soon enough all the things that we could have and should have done. So if I had clarity today, then, as I have today, that I would have done certain things sooner and would have tried to cut it off at the pass from being as high a peak as it could be. That's not an admission of fault, but that is a statement that we could have done something better had we understood it. The overall COVID reality forced us to put a lot of things on the sideline. We were going to do some work on Westchester County Airport master plan to try to start to put a plan for the future at the airport. We repaved the runway for safety, but that's about all we did. And the airport commercial traffic has dropped to nothing, even though the general aviation is still pretty high. So that's been put on the sidelines. We have to restart the engine. Our ability to really advance affordable housing, which the county needs plenty of, has been limited because in this moment of time, most construction projects that hadn't been started yet, I mean, in the finance or the development stages, just got put on hold because the society wasn't reliably ready to invest money and to do certain building of things like that. On the other hand, the things that we had underway, we're still working on. The plans for Memorial Field are coming along. The New Rochelle Family Court, which was quite a debate for six and a half years, is in the process of being finalized. We'll open that up in 2021, and we'll be proud of that. We were able to accomplish some of the things prior to 20 that were also physical improvements to the North County Trailways, to the two pools at the Sprain Ridge Complex in Yonkers and Jackson Avenue. We fixed the Miller House, which is in a state of collapse, the Washington headquarters in North Castle on Virginia Road. So we've had some of those successes, and I'm sort of proud of those as well. The reestablishment of the household chemical cleanup days was, I think, a positive as well. And we've done a lot of legislative things as well that we think are good. It's too long to mention here. And the Board of Legislators gets equal credit for all of those things, as well as the administration. I think, though, that what we've done most importantly is we've been an activist government, but we have been reasonable in the way we've approached things. We passed this year, at my urging, the toughest county executive term limit in New York State, a 2-term limit. No other county has a 2-term limit on the county executive, and the county executive himself advanced the bill. That's almost unheard of, that an official would impose county limits on their own term and apply to them, because I believe in it. I think you have to limit executive power. You have it at the national level. You have it in a couple of other places. But I think, county executive needed it. It was a good thing to do. It limits, if I, do run again next year, it'll be my last term. And I think it's a wise thing to do. And that's something that I think, happened in 2020 that people go, well, really? I didn't even know it happened. I was so busy watching COVID. I didn't realize you did that. But yes, we did. And it's, I think, fairly well unprecedented. So a host of things that, we did not do in 20 now become part of our 21 agenda. And we'll try to move forward as intelligently as we can for what will be the last of my 4-year term.
Will you run for re-election?
Yeah, I'm leaning that way pretty assuredly. I think I'll make a formal announcement in January. It's an early voting process right now. So where you had in the past, you'd make an announcement in May or so, and then you do certain things you have to do to qualify in June. Now all of that gets pushed up to February and March. I would much rather have the budget behind me, passed and established, get through the holiday season, make the formal announcement in January. But since I've given it a 2-term limit, since I lost the 3rd year of my term this year with COVID sort of dominating everything, I would very much want the chance to try to finish things that I haven't completed, tackle some things that I haven't yet had a chance to tackle, and do the best I can before I turn the car keys over to somebody else. I've been a student of this for a long time. I knew a number of my predecessors personally. And, some of them accomplished some great things. Ed McCallian's name is on the building for a reason. Al Del Bello, Andy O'Rourke, Republicans and Democrats. Andy Spano had a number of accomplishments. And when you go back prior to McCallian, the first 3 county executives, we honored by naming meeting rooms on the 9th floor of the county executive suite after William Blakely, Herb Gerlach, and James Hopkins. So I'm very much a student of these things. If there was a Mount Rushmore for county executives, I would not be on it, but that's okay. I'm not worried about I'm not worried about that stuff. I'm a kid from the south side of Mount Vernon. I've been given an opportunity at this moment in time. I'm trying to show good, sensible leadership. And if there is a legacy, let that be the legacy, that he was a good, sensible leader, worked hard, decent guy, and always got interviewed by John Marino and enjoyed it every time he did.
All right, so let's look at it from this perspective now. You imposed term limits on yourself. Let's say you run for a 2nd term, you get elected, you serve 2 terms, and you really feel like you're getting the job done and there's more to do. Won't you feel like you kind of put a crimp in what you can still do to continue to build that legacy for yourself and the people of Westchester, and feel like, well, maybe I shouldn't have done this and I could really go for another term. There's a lot more I can do.
Well, the presumption is that you have to be in elective office to serve. I've been in elective office a long time. I've done a lot of different things. That's right. Well, and but I always say that when somebody says to me, "You're undefeated 19 times," I said, The New England Patriots were undefeated when they went into that Super Bowl game with the Giants. So worry about the next game, not the last game. And from my standpoint, the next level of I hope to be accomplishment, may not be an elective office. Certainly, I've served in the state government as a state legislator, both an assemblyman and a senator. I'm familiar with state government. It might not be an elected capacity, although, it might be. It's just as likely that you could wind up doing something in an appointive job, say at the state level, that would cap off the career, or maybe at the federal level, again, in an appointed position. The clock ticks long for those of us as we age, and certainly in this society. I entered public office as a very young man. I was 34 years old when I first got sworn into the Rye City Council. And so those years have come and gone. They have involved successes, some failures, and I've used up those years. And so now I'm at the other end of the spectrum. I'm a fairly old guy in these things. But nonetheless, as long as there's a contribution to be made that you think you can make it, you try. And I'm not afraid to go before the electorate. I'm not afraid to go before people and say, here's what I want to do. Here's what I have done. And can you trust me with this authority? And if you win, you win. But just as I'm seeing in Washington, if you lose, take it gracefully. Losing and winning are part of the same continuum. And there is nothing written in the stars that says that any one person, by definition, must always win every time out. That's a personal hubris. That's an arrogant attitude. When I run, let's say in 2021, incumbent county executive, but I don't run as, I'm a big guy. I'm the county executive. I run as George Latimer. Here's what I want to do. Here's what I'd like to do it, and this is why I like your support. And if for any reason you don't get that support, then as Shakespeare wrote in Julius Caesar, dear Brutus, the fault is not within our stars, but in ourselves. We are the underlings. How well did we perform? And I think that's what every person who runs for office, win or lose, has to look internally. What did I do that led to this result? And if I won, what do I do to make the most of it? And if I've lost, what did I learn from it?
Mm-hmm. Now, you were first elected to the Rye City Council in 1987, 33 years ago, almost 34 years ago. Served on the county board for a long time, the county Democratic Party chairman, New York State Assembly, New York State Senate, county executive, past few years. You have never lost an election, as you alluded to. That, to me, is a knack, a special skill. How have you been able to do this through the years? 3.5 decades.
I think the thing to recognize is that the first election was here in the city of Rye, where I've lived now for almost 40 years, and Rye was then, and to many ways now, still has a very heavy Republican political affiliation. So I run as a Democrat, and a young Democrat at that, and I have a corporate career intact at the time. But you go out there and you realize I'm not going to win with mailings. I'm not going to win by cute communications. And in those days, you didn't even have emails. You didn't have social media. You had you knock on doors. You stand in front of the grocery store on Saturday morning when, or the newsstand where they come to get a cup of coffee in the New York Times, or in front of the grocery store Saturday afternoon. You meet people and say, hi, I'm George Latimer. I'm running for the city council. I think I can do this. And I think I can do this. Here's what I want to try to do. People in that interpersonal relationship, if they see you in the proper light, if they see you as a person who means what they say and all that stuff, then you have a very good opportunity to win their support, no matter what your party affiliation is. And I think that's been, if you want to call it a secret to my success, it's no secret, but it's the amount of people that you interact with that get to know you beyond just the name or the affiliation. And, there were years when I won election in my home area, the Sound Shore, where my running mates in Rye didn't win, but I did. And I did because I worked hard and I made a personal connection with people. And you remember their name and you remember their kid's name, but you also remember what they're interested in. And when you run into somebody, you say, hey, Pete, I remember you called me a couple of months ago about that drainage situation. We sent some guys out. Did we fix it? And then Pete goes, yeah, George, we did. That was really good. Thank you very much. They walk away thinking, this isn't your average politician. This is a guy who I know. And I asked him to deal with it, and something got resolved. Or if it didn't get resolved, I come and I say, Pete, the problem is an underground stream, and we can't dam it up. We can try to channel it a little bit, but George's going to get some water on your property. And then Pete goes, well, thanks for being straight with me, and talking with me. That, if there is a secret to my success, that's it. And I've been doing that ever since, even at this level. Even yesterday, when I came out of church, a woman came over to me and she had a problem trying to get a Social Security card. And I gave her some information on how to follow up on it. Just walking out of church, I'm no entourage, no aides, nobody, Pete, take this down and get this woman's information, and I think that goes a long way in the world of government.
And I'll point this out too. Yesterday, you came over to the Rye Ridge Shopping Center, and we had our annual food drive going on in connection with Feeding Westchester over at Balducci's, the Stuff a Truck food drive. And you ran into our president, CEO, Andrew Castellano, in one of the delis there over in the Rye Ridge Shopping Center, and just shows George Latimer's a regular guy. You can meet him online.
No entourage, man, just sitting there having a cup of coffee.
Yeah.
I talked with his son. He had a New York Giants hat on. I thought he was a Giants fan. I said, how about those Giants? And he says, I'm a Cowboys fan.
Yeah, he's a Cowboy.
Whoa, wait a minute. Yeah. Whoa, how'd you become a Cowboy fan? You're in New York. But
his father's a Giants fan, as far as I know. So
right.
Gotta keep the family that way. Also have to point this out, too, that throughout 2020, everyone I've spoken to countywide, everyone at every level politically, whether it be a county legislator, a state senator, a mayor, an assembly person, everyone has given George Latimer A+++++ marks for his handling of the COVID pandemic and the way he's brought people together, regardless of whether it's Democrat, Republican, conservative, libertarian, that party decals and party declarations don't matter and party affiliations don't matter. George Latimer has looked at everybody as his neighbor, as a fellow Westchesterite, and that's why things have gone so well during this pandemic in Westchester and why we've recovered the way we have.
Well, John, thanks very much. I appreciate that. It's nice to hear, and I got to earn it every day. As I often said, this will be my closing comments. You know, I grew up on the south side of Mount Vernon. I'm a blue-collar kid, Irish-Italian kid, grew up in primarily a black neighborhood, went to an urban school district. You know, I'd hoped to achieve something in my life. I didn't know what. And when you grow up in kind of a poor working-class neighborhood, you don't really know how far you'll get to go. So I've been very fortunate. When I sit in that corner office on the 9th floor, and I know it's not forever, if I'm the 9th county executive, there's assuredly going to be a 10th and an 11th county executive. I'm grateful for the opportunity. I do want to do as much good as I can do. And if I can do that, and if at the end of my terms, people say he was a good guy, he worked hard, that would be a great legacy to take into retirement.
And by the way, you brought up Memorial Field. It would be great to get the Memorial Field, a project finally done after all these years. I know that's been a sore spot, a big hole in Mount Vernon for decades, going back to when I first came into the county in the late 80s, around the time when you first got elected to the Rye City Council.
Yeah, you know, it's unfortunate because Memorial Field in my youth was a tremendous venue. It looked great. It had the old historic grandstands, which were taken down and unfortunately will never be replaced that way, although the field will be made new and modern. I got my high school graduation diploma on that field 50 years ago. At one point in time when I was playing Little League, they configured the field, which is primarily a football field, but They configured it into baseball diamonds. And I'd love to tell you I played football in high school. I did not. I was in the marching band, played baritone horn. So I walked down the field all right with a uniform on, but not a football in my hand, baritone horn.
And, still part of the program. So that makes you part of the program.
Well, I was there. You know, the cheerleaders looked to the football players, not the band players. But you know, I have memories there as a young man. And now if we can get that field open for the next generation of young people that go out there, that either play football or run track or whatever else they're going to do out there, or play baritone horn, the field becomes operative. And it's a statement in Mount Vernon, which has to be made. It's a statement that government can accomplish things. There's a sense of failure because nothing has happened at Memorial Field for 12 years. Argument, disagreement, I want this, no, I want that. We can't get it together. And it just stays as a big pile of dirt. And people go by and go, they're all a bunch of baloney. They're full of it. And they'll say worse words. I want to be able to prove to people that no, government can rationally solve something that's been broken. As I said already, we've done it in 2 or 3 other venues, and we're going to do it at Memorial Field, and it's going to work.
Mm-hmm. And just from my personal standpoint, since I came to the county in the late 80s, just announcing White Plains, Mount Vernon football games at Memorial Field, or being part of different charity events and softball games and things like that. That's a special feeling when you walk on the field. It's kind of like the Madison Square Garden of Westchester County. And I think for everybody countywide, not just the Mount Vernon Pelham area, would be a great thing to finally have that problem solved after all these years. Speaking,
it was great venue. You know, it's where they filmed that classic Mean Joe Green commercial with the little kid.
Yeah.
And the little kid offers him, a soda, a Coke.
Right.
And then he flips the jersey to the kid. That was filmed at Memorial Field. Michael Jackson performed at that field. I saw some concerts there when I was a kid. James Brown performed there. So it has an iconic past. And now the question is it going to have a future? And the answer is it does.
Mm-hmm. Now, speaking of futures, and since we're on sports here and sports-related venues, the Mets. I know you're a big Mets fan. New ownership.
I am.
Blue Ponds are gone. Steve Cohen from Greenwich comes in. Your outlook on this 2021 season and this new regime, too?
I'm hopeful. I mean, Steve Cohen is a fresh start. He appears to have the resources that an owner needs to have in order to obtain and retain the best players, because, baseball is a business and there's a lot of money involved, and top quality talent, gets tremendous amounts of money now. You can't put a team together on the cheap. The things that are wrong with the team can be fixed. They need to fix the bullpen. They need a little more reliable starter. They had great reliable starters a couple of years ago, but not all of them materialized. Tim Harvey fell off the wagon ineffectively, but they do have Marcus Furman back. And the other element, of the team is that they have a core of some very good young ball players, some guys who really could go places. Michael Conforto's had a couple of decent years now. Dominic Smith surprised in the shortened season last year. Pete Alonso showed that he's got a lot of power. And so there's a core there that can be better. They finished in last place. They did really poorly from midseason on. But at the end of the day, I'm happy for the Dodgers. They've been flirting around the World Championship for the last 5-6 years.
Right.
I think the Yankees were both cheated by the Houston Astros. Nothing makes me more angry than to see systematic cheating. It's one thing, that an individual does something that he shouldn't do. But when the team organizes themselves to steal signs and bang garbage cans, and, I find that reprehensible. And I think both the Dodgers and the Yankees were cheated out of World Series opportunities because of the Astros, as talented as they were. So hopefully the Mets will put talent on the field. The division, the Braves, have a decent squad. The Marlins, frankly, overperformed this year.
Right.
And the Phillies are always a threat. So the Mets are going to have to prove themselves. They're going to have to win a lot of games. But I am a Mets, Jets, Rangers, Knicks fans. And
like
right
me.
now, I have no hope for the Knicks. I don't know what they're doing in year 20 with what they're doing. The Jets, I guess, are playing for Trevor Lawrence, is it the kid out of Clemson? And, a quarterback alone is not going to straighten them out. We thought Sam Darnold was going to be that.
Yeah. Without an offensive line, a quarterback.
Yeah, they need everything.
Yes.
And, that's the thing. That's what makes me go crazy about the Knicks. In basketball, you need 3 stars and another maybe 3 to 4 good players on the team. That's all you need.
Right.
You just need 7 decent players. You can get by with 6. How can they go 20 years, pick top choices every year? I sound like your angry fan on WFAN. How can they have top choices every year, top 5 choices, and after 15 years of lousy play and top choices, you can't put 7 guys on the field, win your 45 games, and get in the playoffs? I dismiss that. I think the Rangers have a legit future. They've got some good players, and I think they get a top choice this year, or they have a top choice this year that they've got. And so I see them getting into the playoffs now, earning their way in. This last time was sort of like they let a lot of teams in. But I think this year ahead, they're going to earn their way in. And over the next couple of years, if they add a few more pieces, they could do some real damage. It is possible they could win a cup in the next few years. And it's possible that the Mets, under the right set of circumstances, they still got DeGrom. He is a terrific pitcher, and they still have that core of good players. So my hope is that the Mets and the Rangers will get me to the promised land one more time. I hate to say before the end of days, but the reality is when you're a little kid and you're rooting for a team, you got 50 years to see the Jets get into another Super Bowl. I don't have another 50 years to wait for the Jets to get into the
Neither
Super Bowl.
do I. Between those 4 teams, we've had 6 championships, I think, in our lifetime, as I told somebody the other day when I counted it up. Now, for the Knicks, might be some hope with the Westchester kid, Obi Toppin, their first draft pick, who started out.
I think that's that's good, and it's a good story. And the other thing about the Knicks is they've had at various times. I mentioned you need about somewhere between 3 excellent players and another 4 players who can play. They had Kristaps Porzingis, and he was a very capable player. He was one of those pieces, but they didn't find a way to hold on to them. And then what happens is the one good piece you have, if you don't put other players around him, then he says, "Hey, first chance I get, see ya. I'm going someplace where there's a commitment to win because I would like to have a ring." And it used to be that you wanted to be in New York or LA because you could get nationwide attention. But now with the internet and the way the media works, you could be a star in Oklahoma City and or in pick a smaller market, Memphis, and you can still be a national star. You don't have to be in New York or LA. But the Lakers are a perfect example. I know this is now the sports hour of our conversation. Lakers are a good example. Lakers were excellent when the Knicks were excellent back in 70, 72, 73. And they had superstars of that era. They had not Jerry Lucas.
Jerry West.
But they had Jerry West. Jerry West, I was thinking. Elgin Baylor. And they had some great players of that. Well, the Knicks couldn't hold together that quality. But the Lakers came back. They came back with the Magic Johnson era team with Jabbar and Johnson. And then they fell off the wagon. Then they came back with the Kobe Bryant and Shaq O'Neal version, which won championship. And now they're back with the LeBron James, Anthony Davis version. That's 4 separate times. The Knicks had their run with Pat Ewing in the 90s, and that's been it. So you ask yourself, how is it that LA can be good, lose the superstars, find new superstars, and come back, and the Knicks haven't done it in 20 some odd years. So to me, that's management, lack of management skill, and we'll see. You can see I'm a frustrated GM or sportscaster. I don't know what I am, but I'm a big sports nut, as all my friends know.
That we know.
They know that we could long conversations and never touch on politics. We could talk music, we could talk sports, we could talk grandkids, and I'm all in.
George Latimer, County Executive here in Westchester. Our thanks to you for joining us here. Wanted to make sure we got you on one more time before the end of 2020 on Westchester Talk Radio. All the best to you. Thanks to you for all you've done for us throughout the COVID pandemic. All the best in 2021 and happy holidays to you and yours.
I wish you a very Merry Christmas, and for those who celebrate other holidays, a happy holiday season. And best to the team at Sharc. You guys do a great job, and we'll talk to you again.
We'll talk again, George. Thank you. County Executive.
Bye-bye now.
Thanks to you. I'm John Marino, and we are Westchester Talk Radio, produced by Sharc Creative, made possible by N2G, the Indian Point Energy Center, supporting our communities through April of 2021. Lipolis Electric, don't be left in the dark. Get Lipolis. Hightower, Westchester, managing your wealth to a fiduciary standard. White Plains Hospital, special thanks to our White Plains Hospital heroes throughout this COVID-19 pandemic of 2020. Wartburg Healthcare and Rehabilitation in Mount Vernon, Park Sterling Realty in Bronxville, and Michael Labriola Landscape Design and Construction in Armonk. We thank you one and all, and catch all of our Westchester, Fairfield County, Putnam and Dutchess Talk Radio programming on our YouTube channel, Sharc Creative YouTube.